Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, you daily dive into the news. It is Tuesday, and there is a lot to talk about, starting with this. You've got big Candace Owens Brigitte Macron news. But also I'll say it's bigger than Owens, because right now you have 10 people in France on trial for harassing Brigitte Macron with debunked conspiracies that say she's transgender. Right? Brigitte, she's the first lady of France. We've talked about these conspiracies before, and that's largely because Candace Owens just kind of exploded the reach of these claims recently. But even though Candace might be one of the most vocal personalities on this, she's not the first person to spread this theory. And with that, back in 2024, Brigitte's lawyer filed complaints over cyberbullying, which eventually led to multiple arrests in 2025. And so now you've got nearly a dozen people facing a 2-day trial over claims that they made regarding her gender and sexuality, as well as equating the age gap in her relationship with President Emmanuel Macron to pedophilia. And with that, you had a judge saying that these posts have deteriorated the First Lady's physical and mental health. Right? And according to reports, the accused include a self-described medium who played a major role in spreading the theory after posting a 4-hour YouTube video about the subject in 2021. That's along with others, including an elected official, teacher, and computer scientist. But also, reportedly, many of the accused are arguing that they were just joking about this and they don't belong in court over their remarks, with one saying, "It was just a joke. Like a lot of people, I'm asking why I'm here today. Today, you can send people to court for tweets." And another asking, "Do you need a permit in France to crack a joke?" Right? Even though this trial is just 2 days, a verdict isn't expected until later. But also understand, this is a criminal proceeding. So if they're convicted, they could go to jail for up to 2 years. Right? And this is definitely not the only legal action that the Macrons have taken over these trans conspiracies. Right? One of the reasons we talked about it is in July, they sued Candace Owens for defamation for repeatedly claiming that Brigitte was born male. But also that hasn't stopped Candace from continuing to spread that theory, right? I mean, as recently as this weekend, she was posting more what she called evidence to back her claims on Twitter. And then actually the day the trial in Paris started, she wrote, "If it walks like a dude, talks like a dude, and is listed in the French tax registry as a dude, then it's the first dude of France." Right? So she appears to just definitely not be stopping, and the Macrons as well, they're not backing down from their fight. And in fact, with that, just last month, you had BBC News reporting that they would be presenting photographic and scientific evidence to a US court to prove that Brigitte is a woman. You had their lawyers saying it is a process that she will have to subject herself to in a very public way, but she's willing to do it. She is firmly resolved to do what it takes to set the record straight. If that unpleasantness and that discomfort that she has of opening herself up in that way is what it takes to set a record straight and stop this, she 100% is ready to meet that burden. But with all that, you have some seeing this explosion of people that are believing this conspiracy theory and arguing that it speaks to larger trends and issues that we need to care about. With, for example, a professor at the University of Portsmouth in the UK saying, "These rumors are part of the broader wars on truth that characterize much of today's political discourse," saying they are primarily a partisan political phenomenon designed to weaken opponents and erode their legitimacy. But for now, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens with this 2-day trial, as well as what happens with Candace Owens. But then next up in the news, Texas AG Ken Paxton has now filed a lawsuit claiming that the makers of Tylenol actually knowingly withheld evidence of the drug's links to neurodevelopmental disorders. But of course, right, these links, they're unproven right now. And so this just seems to kind of be the latest fallout from Donald Trump claiming that autism can be caused by pregnant women taking Tylenol, which of course goes by the non-brand name
acetaminophen. Is that okay?
Right, and the companies named in Paxton's complaint are Johnson & Johnson, which sold Tylenol for decades, and Kenvue, which is a spin-off company that's sold the drug since 2023. And then with that, you had a spokesperson for Johnson & Johnson noting that the company divested its consumer health business years ago and added all rights and liabilities associated with the sale of its over-the-counter products, including Tylenol, are owned by Kenvue. So actually, with that, Paxton's lawsuit also claims that this is the real reason that Kenvue was created, to shield Johnson & Johnson from liability over Tylenol. Though I will say, Paxton has provided no evidence of that at this point, and when Johnson & Johnson first announced a spin-off in 2021, they said that it was just a business decision. Right, and with that, I do think that it should be noted, there is other stuff and controversies involving Johnson & Johnson, where the company also recently dealt with massively expensive lawsuits over its role in the opioid epidemic and accusations that talc, once used in its baby powder, caused cancer. And then you had the Tylenol lawsuits, kind of picking up steam in 2022, with hundreds being filed in state and federal courts by families who claimed that their children were diagnosed with autism or ADHD after use of Tylenol during pregnancy. In New York, a judge dismissed the biggest batch, more than 500 of them, back in 2023, citing a lack of scientific evidence. But now you've got those plaintiffs appealing the decision, and a hearing's actually scheduled for November 17th. Now, of course, one of the big key differences is you have the President of the United States and RFK Jr. openly discouraging pregnant women from taking Tylenol due to the risk of causing autism. Right? And they both pointed to the same study now being cited in Paxton's lawsuit, a research review which looked at 46 studies and found evidence of a link. But also, a very big thing is that even the researchers who conducted that review cautioned that their findings were not conclusive. And with that, they advised that Tylenol may still be used, but no more than necessary. Right? And so that's what standard medical advice here is already anyway. Right? And then also with that, another major study of nearly 2.5 million children born in Sweden found that any potential link disappears when accounting for genetics. And so with this, independent experts and major medical groups have not stopped recommending Tylenol, noting that it's considered the only pain reliever safe to use during pregnancy to treat high fevers. Right? And we know, without a doubt, if those high fevers are untreated, they can pose serious risks to the health of the baby and the mother. But still, you've had Trump doubling down on this, writing on Truth Social over the weekend. Pregnant women, don't use Tylenol unless absolutely necessary. Don't give Tylenol to your young children for virtually any reason. But then next up in the news, Trump is trying to rig California's special election. Right? That is what top officials, including Governor Gavin Newsom are saying just days before people head out to the polls to vote on Prop 50. And Prop 50 would allow the state to redraw its congressional maps to give Democrats 5 more seats in the House and counter Trump's sweeping campaign to gerrymander more Republican seats in red states. And specifically, you're seeing the allegations of interference coming after Trump's DOJ announced that it'll be sending federal election monitors to 5 counties in California that together make up more than 40% of the state's population. We're talking Los Angeles, Orange County, Riverside, Fresno, and Kern. And that announcement coming after the California Republican Party chair sent a letter to the department requesting the monitors, claiming that the party had, quote, received reports of irregularities in those 5 counties during recent elections, and arguing that those alleged irregularities could undermine either the willingness of voters to participate in the election or their confidence in the announced results of the election. Now with this, I'll say federal monitoring is a routine part of elections, particularly federal elections. But you've got experts saying that the issues flagged in the California GOP's letter, they don't seem to fall under federal jurisdiction because they concern state law and state elections. Right? The federal government, it's not the place where you go to bring state level concerns. Those complaints should go to the California Attorney General's office and California Secretary of State. But also, in addition to that, experts have questioned whether the DOJ has adequately explained why federal election monitors are actually needed in California. Right? Instead, they've just regurgitated the same points that the state GOP has made. And that's actually something you saw echoed by Governor Newsom in a recent interview.
The DOJ just sent out election monitors for a state ballot, for a state constitution. They have no basis, and they have no business for doing that.
And Newsom, he did not mince words about how he views this effort.
They're rigging the election. They're creating the pretext that after we're successful with Prop 50, after there's a Democratic governor in New Jersey, there will be one in Virginia, unquestionably, that they can suggest somehow these were fraudulent. These elections were rigged against them. This is a preview of 2026. Wake up, everybody. I mean, what more? They're just doing it in the open. They're doing it out loud. It's not just trolling you.
But also, it's not just Newsom, right? You also had California Attorney General Rob Bonta telling reporters that he believes the Trump administration will use false reports of voting irregularities to try to challenge the outcome of the election. Right? And Bonta claiming that there's not evidence of widespread fraud that would require federal election monitors. And then with that saying, it's naive to think that Trump will accept the results given his long history of lying about elections. So now, in response, the state AG said that California will be dispatching its own observers to watch the federal monitors. Right? So all of it just screams of a healthy democracy, right? Needing a second set of observers to watch a first set of observers who seem to have been sent just to intimidate voters. But also, beyond that, like Newsom, Bonta argued that this is just the beginning, saying all indications, all arrows show that this is a tee-up for something more dangerous in the 2026 midterms and maybe beyond. And with that, you had the AG specifically pointing to a post that Trump made on Truth Social over the weekend, clearly trying to undermine the election from a different front. Right? And it's not new, but saying without evidence that Democrats were, quote, cheating on elections and repeating the false claim that he beat Biden in 2020. With Trump also going on to say that unless the DOJ cracks down, it will happen again, including the upcoming midterms, and then adding no mail-in or early voting, yes to voter ID. Watch how totally dishonest the California prop vote is. Millions of ballots being shipped. Get smart, Republicans, before it's too late. Now, of course, with that, there is literally zero proof of any fraud or anything even vaguely dishonest with the early and mail-in voting on Prop 50. And there's nothing wrong with millions of ballots being shipped to voters. California law literally requires all registered voters to be sent ballots. And all of this, as Trump's message urging people not to vote early or by mail, it directly contradicts the official messaging of the California GOP, which has encouraged Republican voters to do exactly that. Right? So it's clear what he's doing. We've seen this exact playbook before. There's no guesswork involved. Trump and co, they're sowing the seeds to subvert democracy and undermine the will of the people, and California is just a taste, a preview. So, for now, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens, though. Just to add my 2 cents, I've said this and I still stand by it. If you live in California, you are a California voter, I highly recommend you go out and vote in this election because the stakes truly couldn't be high. There are very few options right now on how people can actually resist what appears to be Trump's authoritarian takeover of the government, and this is one of them. I hate that it is at this place. In an ideal world, nationwide, we have third-party lines being made. It's as fair as possible. But when Trump, others, really whoever in life just throw out the rule book and they're going power by any means necessary, you can't tie your hands behind your back to act like the situation's normal. This is not normal. Right? I know I try to keep an even tone through everything. It's my presentation style. You are not crazy for feeling like everything is crazy right now. But you are crazy if you think things are going to go a positive way if you don't do something when you can't. Going to the ballot box is one of those ways. And here, not only will your vote help determine control of the House in 2026 to combat what Trump's trying to do with gerrymandering and redistricting, it'll also set the tone and possibly give us a glimpse into what Trump's inevitable efforts to deny the outcome of certain midterm elections looks like. And then we're diving into even more in just a minute. But first, let me say, you ever notice how you'll spend an hour scrolling for a good brunch spot, but booking a doctor, suddenly you're too busy? Because yeah, same, until I finally got my life together with today's sponsor, ZocDoc. Because ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. Like seriously, you can search and compare over 100,000 in-network doctors across every specialty: mental health, dental, primary care, urgent care, all of it. You can filter by location, insurance, and ratings from verified patients, so you actually get a doctor that fits your needs. And once you find them, you can see their real-time appointment openings and instantly click to book. No phone tag, no hold music, just done. And the best part, appointments happen fast, often within 24 to 72 hours and sometimes even same day. I mean, it's the right kind of shortcut because taking care of yourself shouldn't feel like a chore. I personally use it, I personally love it, and honestly, it's made booking care feel less like a task and more like a relief. So, hey, stop putting off all ththose doctor's appointments, scan the QR code, or go to ZocDoc.com/Phil to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/Phil, ZocDoc.com/Phil. But then next up in the news, Musk just dropped his latest project called Grokpedia, which is a competitor to Wikipedia, but instead of crowdsourcing information, Grokpedia's articles are created using Musk's XAI and their chatbot, formerly known as Mecha Hitler. Right, and this whole idea appears to have actually been born a month ago when Musk made an appearance on the All In podcast hosted by David Sachs, where he was singing Grok's praises.
If you take say Wikipedia as an example, but this really applies to books, PDFs, websites, every form of information. Grok is using heavy amounts of inference compute to look at, as an example, a Wikipedia page and say, what is true, partially true, or false, or missing in this page? Now rewrite the page to remove the falsehoods, correct the half-truths, and add the missing context.
Elon, by the way, could you just publish that? Could we create like a Grokopedia?
But Sachs going on to say that something like this is necessary because he says that Wikipedia has become heavily partisan and, quote, full of activists, which is a cause that Musk himself has taken up this year, saying that Wikipedia is too woke and generally disparaging what he called an extension of legacy media propaganda. But since that moment with David Sachs, the idea of Grokopedia very quickly snowballed into a reality. And you've had Musk saying that it's super important for civilization and a necessary step towards the XAI goal of understanding the universe. Right? And as far as how it works exactly, there are still a lot of unanswered questions. So obviously, the big difference is the lack of apparent human authors, with Grokopedia saying that their articles are, quote, fact-checked by Grok, something that's sparked some concern because large language models like Grok have been known to hallucinate or make up facts. But even with those questions and concerns going largely unaddressed, the first iteration of Grokopedia went live yesterday with its homepage touting some 885,000 articles. And just for comparison's sake, Wikipedia's English version has more than 7 million pages. But that said, right off the bat, there have been some issues. First up, the launch was delayed by about a week, with Musk saying they had to, quote, do more work to purge out the propaganda. And then when the site did launch yesterday, it crashed within hours before coming back up last night. But the big thing that people are talking about is the content of these articles. Because wouldn't you know it, some of these articles, they seem to skew in favor of Musk's recent views and just right-wing talking points in general. So for example, with the entry about January 6th, you have Grokopedia saying it happened, quote, amid widespread claims of voting irregularities, before then going on to say the events of that day fueled enduring disputes over its nature, ranging from a legitimate expression of grievances against perceived electoral flaws to a premeditated threat to democratic transfer of power, with mainstream accounts often amplifying casualty figures and intent beyond forensic evidence while downplaying antecedent failures in election oversight and riot containment. Right? And then there's the expansive entry on Musk himself, which has flowery things to say like, quote, his public persona blends innovative visionary with irreverent provocateur. And all of this is, some journalists have already pointed out, some blatantly incorrect information